The sterile conference room at St. Mary's Hospital in Chicago fell into dead silence as the private text message flashed across the massive projector screen for everyone to see. Elias, I love you too much to watch you marry her, Roman. The young resident Dr. Elias Thompson felt his heart stop as his boss, the engaged chief of surgery Dr. Roman Hayes, turned pale beside his fiancée in the front row. Gasps rippled through the 20 department heads seated around the long oak table. Colleagues who moments earlier had been nodding through quarterly metrics now stared at Elias with a mixture of disbelief and raw judgment. His phone, the one he had absent-mindedly synced to the projector to share a patient case slide, had betrayed him in the worst possible way. The message, one of hundreds exchanged in stolen moments over the past 8 months, was now public property. Elias's face burned hotter than any surgical lamp he had ever stood under. He wanted to bolt from the room, but his legs refused to move. This was the nightmare he had replayed in his mind every night since the first time Roman's hand had lingered on his shoulder a little too long after a successful triple bypass. Roman sat motionless at the head of the table, his fiancée, Sophia Langford, gripping his arm so tightly her knuckles whitened. She had arrived early for the meeting, proud to support her future husband in his role as the hospital's rising star. Now her perfectly composed face cracked with confusion. Roman, she whispered, loud enough for the front row to hear. The projector light cast harsh shadows across his chiseled features, making the gray at his temples look almost silver. He did not look at Elias. He did not need to. The silence between them spoke volumes. Elias's mind raced back to the beginning, 6 months earlier, when he had joined the cardiothoracic team fresh from residency. Roman had been the mentor everyone fought to scrub in with. Calm under pressure, brilliant with a scalpel, and surprisingly gentle when explaining complex anatomy to nervous residents. Their first late-night case had stretched until dawn. After the patient was wheeled to recovery, they stood together in the empty scrub room, peeling off masks and gloves. You have good hands, Thompson, Roman had said quietly, his voice tired but warm. Don't let the long hours break that. Something in the way he said it made Elias's chest tighten. He had always known he was gay, but he had buried it deep beneath layers of small-town Ohio expectations. Parents who still asked when he would bring home a nice girl, cousins who joked about real men in medicine. Roman's engagement ring glinted under the fluorescent lights that night, a silent boundary. Yet boundaries had a way of blurring when two people spent 16 hours straight saving a life. Over the following weeks, the conversations deepened. Coffee in the call room turned into walks in the hospital garden after midnight rounds. Roman spoke of the pressure from his own family, old-money Chicago lineage that viewed Sophia as the perfect match for his career trajectory and their social standing. She's kind, he admitted once, voice low. But kindness isn't the same as feeling alive. Elias listened, heart pounding, because he understood the weight of pretending. One rainy evening after a particularly brutal shift, they ended up at Elias's modest apartment 2 blocks from the hospital. Roman had come under the pretense of reviewing a research paper. They never opened the laptop. Instead, Roman reached across the small kitchen table and brushed a stray hair from Elias's forehead. The kiss that followed was hesitant, full of years of unspoken longing on both sides. It tasted like fear and relief all at once. From that night forward, they built a fragile world of stolen time. Quick texts during rounds, weekend drives to a cabin outside the city where no one knew them, whispered promises that this was real even if the world could never know. Elias's best friend Marcus, another resident, had started asking pointed questions after noticing Elias's sudden disappearances. You're glowing, man, but you also look like you're carrying the weight of the world, Marcus had said last week. Elias brushed it off with a laugh that sounded hollow even to his own ears. Roman, meanwhile, grew quieter every time Sophia dropped by the hospital with lunch or plans for their upcoming wedding. The guilt gnawed at both of them, yet the connection, the way Roman looked at Elias like he was the only real thing in his carefully constructed life, kept them coming back. Now, in the boardroom, that fragile world lay in pieces on the projector screen. A junior nurse in the back row whispered something to her colleague. Sophia stood slowly, her designer heels clicking against the tile. Is this some kind of joke? She asked, voice trembling but steady enough to carry. Roman finally met Elias's eyes across the room. In that single glance, Elias saw everything: apology, fear, and something deeper that still looked like love. But love had never felt so dangerous. The board chairman cleared his throat, trying to regain control. Perhaps we should adjourn and sort this privately. But the damage was done. Phones were already being pulled out. Whispers would become rumors by lunch, and rumors would reach the hospital's ethics committee by evening. Elias pushed his chair back, the scrape loud in the quiet room. He needed air. He needed to think. Most of all, he needed to know if the man he had risked everything for was about to choose the life he was supposed to live or the one they had secretly built together. As he reached the door, Roman's voice cut through the murmurs, low, controlled, but unmistakably directed at him. Elias, wait. The single word hung in the air like a lifeline and a noose all at once. Elias paused, hand on the knob, heart hammering against his ribs. Whatever came next would change both their lives forever. Elias stepped into the hallway, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like angry hornets. Roman followed seconds later, closing the conference room door behind him with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than the chaos they had just left. Sophia remained inside, surrounded by concerned colleagues offering tissues and whispered reassurances. Elias could hear her muffled sobs through the thick wood. The sound twisted something deep in his gut. What the hell were you thinking? Syncing your personal messages? Roman hissed, voice low but edged with panic. His usually impeccable suit jacket was now wrinkled where Sophia had gripped it. Up close, Elias could see the fine lines of exhaustion around Roman's eyes, lines that had deepened in the months since their affair began. I was trying to show the new valve replacement protocol. Elias shot back, keeping his own voice steady even though his hands shook. I didn't realize the texts were still open. You know I'd never. He stopped, swallowing hard. I'd never deliberately hurt you. Roman ran a hand through his dark hair, the silver strands catching the light. Hurt me? Elias, my fiancée, just saw proof that I've been lying to her for months. My career, our careers, could be over by morning. The board is already scheduling an emergency ethics review. He leaned against the wall, suddenly looking every one of his 38 years. I told you we had to be careful. Sophia's father sits on the hospital foundation board. This isn't just personal anymore. The words landed like a scalpel to the chest. Elias had known the risks. Roman had repeated them often enough during their late-night conversations. But hearing them now, after the exposure, felt different. So what? We pretend none of it happened? Go back to stolen glances in the and me watching you plan a wedding you don't even want. The hurt in his own voice surprised him. He had always been the careful one, the one who double-checked doors and deleted messages. Roman had been the one who initiated the first kiss, the one who said, I can't keep living half a life. Roman's expression softened for a fraction of a second. I never said I didn't want you. God, Elias, you're the only thing that feels real anymore. But I have responsibilities. My parents, they poured everything into my education so I could carry on the family name. Sophia's family merged their foundation money with ours last year. Calling off the wedding now would destroy more than just us. Elias laughed bitterly, the sound echoing down the empty corridor. So I'm the disposable one? The young resident you could play house with until real life called. He turned away, staring at the framed medical degrees lining the wall. All the proof that hard work and sacrifice were supposed to lead to success. Right now they felt like chains. A door opened farther down the hall. Marcus stepped out, scrub cap still on, eyes widening when he saw them. Elias? Everything okay? I heard. He stopped, taking in Roman's tense posture and Elias's flushed face. I'll give you space, he said quietly, but the look he gave Elias was full of questions. Questions Elias had dodged for months. Roman waited until Marcus disappeared around the corner. Meet me at the roof access in 10 minutes. We can't talk here. He brushed past, close enough that Elias caught the familiar scent of his aftershave, the same one that lingered on pillows after their secret weekends away. The next 10 minutes stretched like an eternity. Elias paced the stairwell, replaying every decision that had led him here. Coming to Chicago for the prestigious residency program. Accepting Roman's invitation for that first after-hours drink. letting himself believe that love could exist outside the neat boxes society demanded. His phone buzzed, a text from his mother back in Ohio. "Heard you had a big presentation today? Proud of you, honey. When are you bringing someone special home?" The irony burned. When he finally pushed open the roof door, the Chicago wind whipped at his white coat. Roman was already there, leaning against the parapet, city lights sparkling below like scattered diamonds. "I'm sorry," Roman said without turning. "I never meant for you to be collateral damage." Elias joined him, shoulders brushing. "Then choose. Right now? Me or the life they planned for you." The words hung between them, heavier than any diagnosis they had ever faced together. Roman's hand found his in the darkness, fingers intertwining with a grip that felt both desperate and certain. But certainty in the face of everything they stood to lose was a dangerous thing. Below them, the hospital continued its rhythm. Ambulances arriving, monitors beeping, lives being saved and sometimes lost. Up here, two men stood at the edge of their own precipice, unsure which way they would fall. The days that followed the boardroom explosion passed in a blur of closed-door meetings and sidelong glances. Elias threw himself into patient rounds with a ferocity that surprised even Marcus. "You're scaring the interns," his friend joked during a rare lunch break in the cafeteria, but his eyes held real concern. "Talk to me, man. Whatever's going on with DR. Hayes, you don't have to carry it alone." Elias wanted to. He wanted to unload the entire story, the fear, the love, the guilt, but the words stuck in his throat like a swallowed scalpel. Coming out to Marcus would make everything real in a way he wasn't ready for. Roman, meanwhile, moved through the hospital like a ghost in an expensive suit. His office door stayed closed. Sophia stopped bringing lunch. Hospital gossip reached fever pitch. Some said Roman had already called off the engagement. Others claimed he was doubling down on wedding plans to save face. Elias avoided the cardiothoracic wing entirely, volunteering for extra shifts in the ER where the chaos left no room for thinking. Then came the summons. The ethics committee wanted separate meetings. Elias sat in the small conference room on the 5th floor, palms sweating against his khakis. Dr. Patel, the committee chair, slid a folder across the table. "We've reviewed the circumstances. No patient care was compromised, but the power imbalance is concerning. Dr. Hayes is your direct supervisor." Elias nodded, throat tight. "I understand." He did not defend himself. He did not mention the way Roman had looked at him on the roof that night, the way his voice had cracked when he whispered, "Give me time." That evening Roman found him in the parking garage. The air smelled of rain and exhaust. "They're giving us both a warning," Roman said quietly. "No formal reprimand if we maintain professional distance." His eyes searched Elias's face. "But I can't do that. Not anymore." Hope flared in Elias's chest, bright and dangerous. "What are you saying?" "I told Sophia everything last night. Not the details, just that my heart isn't in the marriage. She's hurt, but she's also relieved in a way. Her father is furious, of course. The foundation money is complicated." Roman stepped closer, voice dropping. "I'm not ready to shout it from the rooftops, Elias. But I'm done pretending with her." The kiss that followed was urgent, tasting of relief and leftover fear. For the first time since the meeting, Elias allowed himself to believe they might survive this. They drove to the cabin that weekend, the same one where they had spent their first full night together. No phones, no hospital pagers. Just the two of them cooking pasta in the tiny kitchen and talking until the sun rose. Roman spoke of his childhood, the expectations that had shaped him into the man who always did what was required. Elias talked about Ohio summers and the church youth group where he first realized he was different. They made plans, quiet ones, about maybe moving to a different hospital after Elias finished residency. Small steps toward a life that felt honest. But secrets, once cracked, have a way of leaking. On Monday morning, Marcus cornered Elias in the locker room. "I saw you two in the garage Friday. Look, I'm not judging. I've suspected for a while. But people are talking, and not everyone is as open-minded as me. Dr. Patel's assistant is tight with Sophia's dad. You need to be careful." The warning sat heavy in Elias's stomach. That afternoon, Roman's mother called the hospital switchboard looking for her son. When the operator transferred her to Elias by mistake, a common occurrence since they often covered each other's cases, She didn't bother with pleasantries. "I know who you are," she said coldly. "My son has worked too hard to throw it away on some phase. End it, or we'll make sure the board knows exactly how this started." The line went dead. Elias stood frozen in the residence lounge, phone still pressed to his ear. The threat was clear. Roman's family had connections that reached far beyond the hospital. When he told Roman later that evening in the on-call room, the older man's face hardened. "She doesn't get to decide this." But Elias saw the flicker of doubt. Roman had spent 38 years trying to be the perfect son. Breaking that pattern entirely would cost more than either of them had calculated. The next week brought the first real fracture. During morning rounds, a senior attending made a pointed comment about certain residents getting special treatment. Roman shut it down immediately, voice ice cold, but the damage lingered in the team's eyes. Elias felt the isolation settle around him like a sterile drape. Even Marcus started taking extra shifts to avoid being seen with him too often. The loneliness was new and sharp. Then came the turning point Elias had dreaded. Sophia appeared in the hospital lobby one afternoon, eyes red but determined. She asked to speak with him privately. In the small chapel on the ground floor, ironically the same place Roman had once proposed to her, she slid an envelope across the pew. Inside were printed screenshots of every text Roman had ever sent Elias. "He left his laptop open," she said quietly. "I wasn't spying. I just needed to understand." Her voice cracked. "He loves you. I can see it. But he's terrified of losing everything else. If you really care about him, give him space to figure out who he is without the hospital watching every move." She stood, smoothing her skirt. "I'm not fighting for him anymore. I just don't want to watch him destroy himself trying to have both worlds." Elias sat alone in the chapel long after she left, the stained glass light painting colored patterns across the envelope. Sophia's words echoed the fear he had carried since the beginning. Love was supposed to be simple. Theirs had never been. When Roman found him later, Elias handed him the envelope without speaking. Roman's face went white as he flipped through the pages. For the first time since the boardroom, he looked truly broken. "I never meant for any of this to touch you," he whispered. But it had. And now they stood at the edge of another impossible choice. The following month tested every boundary they had left. Roman moved into a small furnished apartment near the lake, away from the family mansion in the Gold Coast. Sophia returned the engagement ring without drama, though her father made his displeasure known through pointed emails to the hospital board. Elias continued his residency rotations, but the once welcoming hallways now felt lined with invisible landmines. Whispers followed him into the elevators. A few nurses stopped saying hello. The isolation carved deeper grooves into his confidence. Marcus remained the one steady presence. One night after a brutal 36-hour shift, he dragged Elias to a quiet dive bar 2 blocks from the hospital. "You look like hell," Marcus said, sliding a beer across the scarred wood. "Talk." Elias finally did. The entire story spilled out, the late nights, the fear, the love that still burned brighter than any surgical light. Marcus listened without interruption, then clapped him on the shoulder. "You're not alone in this. Plenty of us have walked the same road. Just promise me you won't let them break you." The words were simple, but they anchored Elias in a way nothing else had. Roman, meanwhile, threw himself into research papers and complex cases, as if perfect performance could erase the scandal. Their stolen moments grew rarer, more cautious. A quick coffee in the park instead of weekends at the cabin. A text instead of a call. Elias felt the distance widening even as Roman insisted nothing had changed. "I just need time to stabilize my position here," Roman would say, voice tight over the phone. "Once the board forgets, we can think about telling people properly." Elias wanted to believe him. He tried. But doubt had taken root. The breaking point arrived during the hospital's annual gala, a black-tie fundraiser that doubled as a networking event for every major donor. Elias had not planned to attend, but Marcus insisted it would look worse if he hid. He rented a cheap tux and stood awkwardly near the dessert table, nursing a soda. Across the ballroom, Roman moved through the crowd like he belonged there, Sophia's father shaking his hand with forced politeness. Their eyes met once. Roman's expression flickered with something raw before he turned away. Later, in the dimly lit hallway near the restrooms, Roman pulled Elias into an alcove. "You look incredible," he murmured, fingers brushing Elias's lapel. The kiss was desperate, tasting of champagne and regret. I miss you every day. Elias pulled back. Then stop acting like I'm a secret you're ashamed of. The words came out sharper than intended. Roman's face closed off. It's not that simple. They were interrupted by voices, Sophia's father and two board members rounding the corner. The older man's eyes narrowed when he spotted them standing too close. Dr. Thompson, he said coldly. Still here, I see. The implication hung heavy. Roman stepped between them. This is neither the time nor the place. But the damage was done. By the next morning, the rumor mill had new fuel. The young resident was still pursuing the chief even after the engagement ended. Elias received an official letter the following week, a formal request to transfer to another residency program for the good of team dynamics. The words blurred on the page. He had worked his entire life for this opportunity. Losing it now felt like losing part of himself. When he showed Roman the letter in the empty on-call room, the older man's shoulders sagged. I'll fight it, Roman promised. I'll go to the board myself. But Elias heard the hesitation. Fighting meant going public. Going public meant risking the career Roman had spent 2 decades building. That night Elias sat on the roof alone, the same roof where Roman had once asked him to wait. The city lights blurred through unshed tears. He thought about his parents back in Ohio, still sending care packages and asking when he would settle down. He thought about Marcus's quiet support and the patients who had thanked him for saving their lives. He thought about Roman, the man who had shown him what love could feel like when it was honest. The decision crystallized slowly, like a diagnosis coming into focus on a scan. He would leave. Not because he was ashamed, but because staying would force Roman to choose between the life he knew and the one they both wanted. Love sometimes meant stepping away so the other person could breathe. He typed the resignation email at 3 a.m., fingers steady for the first time in weeks. When he hit send, a strange calm settled over him. The next morning, he found Roman waiting outside his apartment building, eyes red from lack of sleep. Don't do this, Roman said, voice cracking. We can figure it out together. Elias looked at the man he loved and saw the same fear that had lived in his own chest for months. I'm not running, he said softly. I'm giving us both a chance to become the men we're supposed to be, without hiding. Roman reached for him, but Elias stepped back. Some sacrifices hurt more than any scalpel ever could. The transfer papers arrived faster than expected. Elias was offered a residency completion slot at a smaller hospital in Milwaukee, far enough to start fresh, close enough that the drive was manageable if he ever wanted to return. He packed his apartment in a weekend, Marcus helping carry boxes down to the rented U-Haul. You're doing the right thing, Marcus said quietly as they taped the last box. Doesn't mean it doesn't suck. Elias managed to smile. Tell me about it. Roman stayed away during the packing. Elias understood. Seeing the physical proof of his departure would have made everything too real. They had agreed to one final meeting at the cabin before Elias left Chicago for good. The drive up felt endless. Autumn leaves blurring past the windows like memories he wasn't ready to release. When he pulled up, Roman's car was already there. The older man stood on the porch, hands in his pockets, looking smaller than Elias had ever seen him. Inside, the cabin smelled of pine and the faint trace of the coffee they used to brew together. They didn't speak at first. Roman simply pulled Elias into his arms and held on like a man drowning. When they finally separated, Roman's eyes were wet. I've been thinking about what you said. About becoming the men we're supposed to be. He swallowed hard. I told the board I'm stepping down as chief. Effective next quarter. I'm going to open a private practice. No more politics, no more hiding behind titles. And I'm going to tell my family the truth. All of it. Elias stared, heart hammering. You don't have to do that for me. I'm not, Roman said. I'm doing it for us. Because you were right. I can't keep living half a life. Not if I want to be the man who deserves you. He took Elias's hands. Come with me to Milwaukee. Or let me follow you. I don't care where we end up as long as we're together and honest. The words unlocked something Elias had kept chained since the boardroom explosion. Tears came then, not from sadness, but from the sheer relief of possibility. They spent the night talking about practical things. Roman's practice, Elias finishing residency, maybe a small house with a backyard neither of them had ever dared dream about. When morning light filtered through the curtains, Elias felt lighter than he had in months. The drive back to Chicago was different. Roman followed in his own car. They stopped at a roadside diner for breakfast, sitting across from each other without fear for the first time. The waitress smiled at them without a second glance. Small victories. But real life rarely allowed clean endings. Roman's mother arrived at his apartment the next day, unannounced and furious. "You're throwing away everything we built," she accused, voice sharp enough to cut glass. Roman stood tall. "No, Mother. I'm finally building something real." When she left, slamming the door, Roman turned to Elias. "That was the hardest conversation I've ever had. But I feel free." Elias pulled him close. "We both are." The hospital threw a quiet farewell gathering for Elias, mostly Marcus and a few residents who had stayed loyal. Roman attended as a colleague, keeping professional distance until the very end. In the parking lot afterward, he pressed a small box into Elias's hand. Inside was a simple silver key. "To the new place in Milwaukee," Roman said softly. "Whenever you're ready." Elias drove north the next morning with the key on his keychain and hope in his chest. The road stretched ahead, wide and open, much like the future they were choosing together. Milwaukee welcomed Elias with crisp lake air and a smaller hospital where no one knew his name or his story. The residency program director was kind. The case is challenging but manageable. For the first time in years, Elias felt he could breathe without looking over his shoulder. He threw himself into learning the new protocols, mentoring younger students, and slowly, carefully, building a life that included quiet dinners with Roman on weekends. Roman's transition was slower but steady. The private practice opened in a modest storefront near the lakefront. Patients came slowly at first, drawn by his reputation rather than his personal life. When the local paper ran a small profile mentioning his personal journey toward authenticity, Roman framed the article and hung it in the waiting room. "No more hiding," he told Elias one evening as they cooked pasta in the new apartment they had rented together. The words felt like a vow. Elias's parents visited once, driving up from Ohio with casseroles and questions. The conversation was awkward at first, his mother's eyes widening when Roman joined them at the table, but slowly the tension eased. His father even shook Roman's hand at the end of the weekend. "You make our son happy," he said gruffly. "That's what matters. Small steps, but steps forward." Marcus flew up for a long weekend, teasing them both mercilessly but hugging Elias tight before leaving. "Proud of you, man. Both of you." The friendship, once strained by secrecy, grew stronger in the light of honesty. There were still hard days. Roman's father stopped speaking to him entirely. A few old colleagues from Chicago sent polite but distant emails. Elias occasionally woke from nightmares about the boardroom projector. But each time he reached across the bed and found Roman there, solid, present, choosing him every morning, the shadows retreated. One crisp autumn evening they stood on their small balcony overlooking the lake, the same glowing sunset they had once only dreamed about painting the sky gold. Roman slipped an arm around Elias's waist. "Remember the roof in Chicago?" he asked softly. Elias smiled. "How could I forget? I almost lost you that day," Roman said. "Because I was too scared to choose us." He turned Elias to face him. "Thank you for giving me the courage to try again." They kissed then, slow, unhurried, under the open sky where no one could see but the stars. It was the kind of moment that made every struggle worth it. Not perfect, not without scars, but real. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Elias looked at the man beside him and felt the last piece of fear dissolve. They had walked through fire together and emerged not broken, but stronger. The journey of identity, love, and acceptance was never truly over, but for the first time, it felt like one they could face side by side. True or false? Hiding your true self is sometimes the only way to protect the people you love.